All right, everybody. Hello and welcome back. It feels like forever since I've done this show, but we're coming back from Memorial Day weekend. I almost said Labor Day, but it's not Labor Day yet. Labor Day this year will be very, very different for me, and I'm very, very excited for that. But won't talk too much about that. Obviously the personal stuff, the daughter on the way, but I'm very, very excited. So this year's gonna be a lot different. But regardless, Memorial Day weekend, we got back. Tons of crazy stuff happened over the last week. It literally feels like forever since I dived into political stuff. But I've been listening to my guest shows a whole bunch the last couple days, and she's truly incredible. I really enjoyed everything that she's done recently. So we're looking forward to today's conversation. But before we get into all that stuff, please make sure you go to all the links below where you can find myself, my guest, everything she's got going on. Go to Tiger Fitness through the link below to get all your supplements, get you all jacked and tan. I'm running out of the strawberry lemonade branch chain amino acids, so I got to load up on those. So make sure you go to tigerfitness.com and use code Kyle at checkout to get some of those, because those are definitely my favorite flavor. It's so good. It almost tastes like a cotton candy, but it's like a strawberry lemonade. It's delicious. But yeah, code Kyle at checkout at tigerfitness.com. Fox and Sons Coffee, Kyle as well. Let Steven know that I sent you, and Deemed Fit through the link below. All that stuff will help support the Matovic family as we grow very, very excitedly. But yeah, today's show is going to be really, really cool, and I brought somebody absolutely fantastic with me to talk about everything going on. So let's get into it. Where the heck is it? There we are. And welcome back to the show, Miss Sabrina Salvati. How you doing?
Hey, how are you? I'm doing good.
Very, very good. And I'm very, very excited to have you today. I always admire seeing your leg press videos, because I'm like, you know what? She's getting after it. And what was it? 500 pounds is the most you did recently?
Yeah, it's funny. I've been stuck on that. I've been stuck on that number for quite a while. My goal is to get to 600, but it's like I got to a certain point and I'm just kind of stuck there.
Oh yeah, the plateaus are the worst. I recently finally broke mine on the bench press, and you were talking about bench press on your most recent stream, if I remember correctly. And I finally got to 315, which that's like one of the big numbers. Everybody says, oh, you want 4 plates for the squat, 5 plates for the deadlift, 3 plates for the bench, and I finally got all those. So I'm like, okay, now I can like get on drugs, right? I can start doing performance enhancing drugs. I think that's how this works.
Yeah, bench press is the hardest for me. I imagine it's a little bit easier for guys, but for me, like for women, the upper body strength it's a struggle. Like it takes a while to, I think, get to that point. I'm finally at that point where I can lift 100 pounds bench press, but I'm telling you, like it's something about like once you bring that bar down to your chest, it's like, oh my god. This is, it's always harder than you imagine, but I feel like it's interesting. That's the one exercise that doesn't get easier, it seems like, compared to the other ones that I do.
Yeah, so specifically for women, as far as I know, is that they have a lot more lower body strength. So, like, I even saw this in my wife, like, her deadlift progresses very, very well, but then she'd be doing like 45, 50 pounds on the bench press, and she doesn't work out an insane amount. But I'm like, okay, so you're gonna progress very slowly there, but like, we're gonna start getting you to do barbell back squats, and it's like every session she would do a little bit more and more and more. And I'm like, okay, well, yeah, I see clearly that's a way that obviously that works. But like for me, for bench press, I kind of look back to like a year ago. I'm like, okay, I was struggling to do like 225 for like 5 reps, and now it's like 225 for 10 reps is like nothing, and now like 315 is pretty attainable for me. So yeah, I definitely see what you're saying.
Yeah, leg day is my favorite day, because it is true. I think a lot of us women, we prefer leg day because we do have more like lower body like strength. That's how I was able to advance pretty quickly on leg press. But it's a doozy. And then there's one exercise in particular that I don't think I'll ever like, but I do it, and that's those Bulgarian
split squats. I knew you were going there.
Oh my God. It's brutal because, I think if you're not holding dumbbells, it's probably easier, but I never even started that way. Like I have like a trainer, the trainer, she started me with dumbbells, but I feel like that one I never enjoy because you have to balance yourself at the same time. And it's just, I feel like that's always the one that I always dread.
Mhm. Yeah, they don't get any better as you get further into it. So I do Bulgarian split squats mainly to target my glutes. I don't really feel them in my quads as much, so like the all the muscles in your thighs. So yeah, I know I'm kind of into it when I feel the stretch there, but like they always get me super sore. So yeah, I definitely feel what you're saying there. They're not fun. So, one of the main reasons why I want to bring you on is because you are someone who I would put on the left, right? And I don't think you would necessarily disagree with that, but I always enjoy my conversations with people of your persuasion because me being primarily on the right from the libertarian perspective and more of like the dissident right background, um, I find the left wing perspective so refreshing because you guys get all the foreign policy stuff right 100% of the time. Like I never have to worry about, everybody saying, "Oh, well, we're so great on the Middle East, but then all of a sudden we have to fight a war with China," or like, "Oh, they're great on the Middle East, but though Israel, we have to defend our greatest ally." So it's always refreshing to talk to people like you, Nico, Nick, and Misty Winston. All you guys are absolutely fantastic. So there's been a lot of interesting developments over the last couple weeks. So perhaps we could start at what did you think of all the drama, quote unquote, we'll put those quotes there specifically, between Netanyahu and Trump?
I don't think there is as much tension as corporate media is leading on. Like, and I want to be very clear about this. Donald Trump is pro-Israel, just like Biden was pro-Israel and Kamala, is pro-Israel. That's not going to change. I think where there could be issues is that Donald Trump told Netanyahu to wrap this up. Right, like that, this needs to be over, and he wants to have developments in Gaza, like he wants to turn it into like this resort, or whatever. Which again is not his place. I don't want the Palestinian people to lose their home. I don't want them to be pushed out, but I do think it's important that people understand when he says that, when he's talking about wrapping it up, it's not necessarily to benefit the Palestinian people. It's to benefit, what he wants to accomplish there. Like he wants to build resorts, et cetera. And what Israel wants to accomplish there. Israel wants the land. So I think that the media, corporate media, I think they exaggerated that a little bit to, I guess, maybe, I don't know, give people some type of hope that like, things aren't working out too well between Netanyahu and Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, Trump is still pro-Israel. He's not going to turn on Israel. So I think people really need to understand that.
Yeah, I agree. And I have some more right wing friends that always point back to the article from what was it, like 2021, where allegedly Trump said, "Fuck Netanyahu," because he congratulated Biden before the election win. I'm like, if you're really impinging this whole story of Trump and Netanyahu not being friends on one 4-year article, I, I'm sorry, I'm not convinced. You can't tell me the guy who explicitly says I'm the most pro-Israel president, and they have MAGA yarmulkes over there, that he's somehow breaking with Netanyahu. I don't see the cohesion here, and then not to mention all the crackdown on speech as well.
Right. I think people have to understand. And this is the part where some liberals will intervene and they will say, well, this is what happens when you guys didn't vote for Kamala, trying to shame people for not voting for
Yeah.
Kamala Harris. And I think I want people to just understand that if Kamala Harris would have won, Israel would still bomb Gaza. Like that wouldn't have changed. And I think that people are being disingenuous when they try to convince you otherwise. Right. So because both of these candidates were pro-Israel, and Kamala had multiple opportunities to tell people that she would not continue to give weapons to Israel. She had multiple opportunities to tell people that, no, like the Palestinian people have a right to self-determination. She had multiple opportunities to go in a different direction, and she didn't, because honestly, that's not who she is. She made it very clear she's been pro-Israel for a long, long time. So I think that what I would like to see happen, I would like to see some of the other Arab nations stand up more forcefully. And I think if it came from Saudi Arabia, because the US, we really do depend on Saudi Arabia for oil and other means. I think if Saudi Arabia, I think they would have to be the ones. Like I feel like Jordan and Egypt and Turkey, the leaders are. I feel like they're just not going to go in that direction. But I feel like the one country that could actually make a difference here is Saudi Arabia, because the US does need them. So if Saudi Arabia were to say, we cannot continue to do trade with you because of what is happening in Gaza, I feel like then the US wouldn't have a choice. But that's the thing. Like all these other countries that are surrounding, like Gaza and Israel in the Middle East, they're also not willing to stand up to Israel in the way that they should. I mean, it's ridiculous that it's Spain that is now calling for some type of coalition to implement sanctions on Israel. Why Spain? You know, why isn't that happening with the other Arab nations? I mean, it's money. It's all about money and resources, and it's really sad.
Yeah, and I think part of this kind of goes to the other thing I kind of wanted to talk about, and that's that Trump is talking about this whole Abraham's Accords 2.0, and a lot of that largely is, like you said, it's money. It's the fact that the Abraham's Accords essentially was, hey, we're going to throw the Palestinians under the bus, but we're going to pay you all off so that way you don't mind that we're ethnically cleansing and slaughtering your neighbors and people who you look at like family, like like the way that you and I might look at one another, because we live in the same country. We perhaps have a lot of the same, presuppositional beliefs about the way that the country should go and the way that people should be treated. If you just pay them apparently enough money and then give them enough weapons, then eventually they turn away from that. I wish I could say I was optimistic about this, but it does seem like, okay, well, Trump's saying we're going to leave Israel out of this, but we're also not going to pull the string on Israel to get them to stop, ethnically cleansing the Palestinians. And yeah, Doc Jazz, it's all about the Benjamins. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know that Steve Witkoff has been working with or talking to Hamas to get more hostages released. But what I'm seeing is I'm not seeing Gazans get anything out of the deal. Right. So like this is the thing. And I went through the bullet points. There's 13 points that Hamas mentioned that were a part of that deal, this new deal. But even when they released hostage Eden Alexander, there was also supposed to be an end to the blockade on Israel's side. So they didn't get that need of theirs met. And so what I feel like may end up happening is that Hamas will continue to release more and more hostages, and Israel will just eliminate them, the Palestinian people anyway.
Right. Well, and I think we all know before October 7th, there were different situations where Hamas had taken hostages, and they kind of use that as leverage. But now, I mean, it's pretty clear that Israel's not really concerned about the hostages. I mean, they've pretty much explicitly said that with the use of the Hannibal Directive, admitted by Yoav Gallant. What was that, about a year or so ago, that they admitted that they used that on October 7th. It's clear they're not really concerned about their own civilians. They just want to ethnically cleanse the Palestinians. They want to, kill them and then displace them from Gaza and the West Bank, with reckless abandon. And I think Trump, to a small degree, recognizes that as looking bad as happening on his watch. But I think that he's not concerned enough to really do anything about it. He'd much rather just make deals. And you even saw this in the first in his first run through when he vetoed ending the war in Yemen, because he just wanted to sell more weapons to Saudi Arabia.
Right. And this is why I continue to push back on this rhetoric that Trump is anti-war.
Right.
Because if you look at his actions don't show that. I am starting to hear some rumblings, though. I will admit to this. Some people who did support Trump because they thought that he would be the one to be the anti-war president that would end the war in Ukraine and also the genocide in Gaza are starting to speak out and are pretty vocal. And they're saying this isn't what I voted for. This isn't what he promised. So I am starting to see, it seems like there's somewhat of a split within MAGA, because I feel like you have and I hate to say it this, but you have like the Ben Shapiro side of MAGA, which feels like Israel is entitled to all of the land and the US has to continue to support Israel. Then I feel like you have like the Candace Owens anti-war side of MAGA, which is like, no, when we said we were against these wars, that means we were against the wars, regardless if it's Israel or not. So I am noticing somewhat of a split there. And it makes me wonder how that will affect the political future in the United States, especially when we head into the 2028 presidential election. And it makes me wonder, even though Trump was able to take over the Republican Party, it does make me wonder if there's going to be some change there.
Yeah, I've kind of pondered the same thing as well. And with this, very, very slight pressure that's been put on Israel, I almost wonder if that's going to be a conversation funding Israel in the 2028 presidential runs. Is that a little bit naive and optimistic? Maybe, but I do think that there is a significant amount of pushback from the base on this because I don't think people wanted to fund this. I mean, your average boomer Trump supporter really doesn't care about the Middle Easterners, but I think they know that they don't want to fund that anymore. And I remember, being a mechanic now for over 10 years, I definitely expected some of my coworkers immediately when the whole thing in, the Middle East broke out on October 7th, 2023, them to be like, oh, just, wipe the Arabs off the planet. We don't care about them. But I remember them saying, and I was a little bit taken back by this. They said Joe Biden went and visited the Israeli border before he visited our own border. I'm like, well, that's pretty good. And you know what? For them to knock that and not just go straight to kill them damn Muslims, I'm like, I'll take it.
Oh, it's interesting. Where was the support from Joe Biden for East Palestine, Ohio?
Right.
Where was that support for Lahaina, Hawaii, or the hurricane victims in Asheville, North Carolina? Some of which I know personally, by the way. Like, where was that same type of energy and support? All of a sudden, when things happen to Americans, whether it's because of natural disaster or because of a train derailment, there is a limit on how much money the government is willing to give to help the people. But there's no limit on the amount of money that they're willing to give to Israel. And I think that in itself should get everybody pause, whether you agree with the government giving people money or not. The government is giving money to Israel, and they have been for years. We're talking about $3.8 billion. Israel has healthcare for everyone. They have universal healthcare. They have free college there, but we don't have those things here. And I know everybody may not agree with that, but why are we giving money to Israel for them to have those things?
Mm. Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And they do the same thing for Ukraine. I know that you've spoken out against that as well. And I'm not for any kind of universal health care, but I do have to question, how can we sit here and tell people, I've talked about it a decent bit, but my wife and I are expecting our first kid here in a couple months. And, we've heavily debated about how we're going to have to raise our daughter because of our financial situation. Like, we do pretty good for being a younger couple, but regardless, we put off having children for quite a while because of the economic situation for people like us. And like, how are we even concerned about any foreign country and anything like that, taking care of immigrants when people like, you and I would sit here and have this conversation like, I don't know if we could do that. It's not in our budget to have kids. We have to have a GoFundMe if we have a medical expense. Like, how is that acceptable that, Trump sent, $17 billion to Israel this year so far? Biden sent, God knows how much to Israel throughout his tenure. And then, $200 billion to Ukraine throughout his tenure. How are we having like this conversation about foreign aid when people like us are struggling to afford houses, healthcare? People 10 years younger than me, coming up 18, 20 years old, they may never own a house, but somehow we can always come up with money to send to other countries and overthrow dictators when we don't like them.
I think this is all the part of the plan of the billionaire class, of the elites. Part of the reason why the birth rate has declined is because of what you said. Like, people just can't afford to have kids, not to mention how much the hospital bill is if you choose to have your child in a hospital. We're talking like thousands and thousands of dollars.
Yes.
To deliver a baby in a hospital. And there are different ways you can go about that. But for some people, depending on whatever the situation may be, they may have to have the delivery in the hospital. Right. So So this is something also that needs to be addressed, right? And they realize that the birth rate is also declining. And I really do think that, and this may sound a little conspiratorial, but I really do believe that people like Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, um, Larry Fink, who owns BlackRock, all these people have relationships with each other, regardless of political ideology, because the one thing they have in common is their wealth. And they don't want to see that go away. And one would think, like, if you're like me, there are times where I've thought, when is enough enough? Like, if you're a billionaire, don't you have enough money? You know what I've come to realize? It's never enough. As people get richer, they never feel like what they have is enough. It's like they always continue to want to acquire more and more wealth. What I think is happening, I really think all of these people have bunkers. I think Bill Gates does for sure. I think they have bunkers. I think they are totally prepared for the demise of a vast majority of the population, whether that is through war, nuclear war, which hopefully we do not get to that point, or whether it is through some type of climate, disaster or catastrophe. They're all prepared for this. They're going to be totally fine. They don't really care if, poor, lower income people die because we don't have the money or the means to continue to thrive in this country. So the whole idea of the American dream, I feel like that was gone years ago. And it's really crazy when you look at some of the other countries that do have these policies in place, and they don't have to worry about having an expensive hospital bill or anything like that. And you see their quality of life is better. Like the quality of life in Iceland is better. The quality of life in Finland, is better than it is in the United States. They don't have this type of stress. They don't have to worry about medical debt, which is a big problem here among a lot of Americans. And I just don't think that they care. I really do think that they have already prepared themselves for a removal of a vast majority of the population, of the Earth's population. And I feel like they have access to resources that we may never even know about. People make jokes about the doomsday preppers, but they're like, oh, the one crazy guy who's a doomsday prepper. But the billionaires are doomsday preppers. Like I said, like they have bunkers, they've been planning for this for years. And I really think that group of people in particular, that they feel the best way to fix things is to remove some of the people who are already here by whatever means necessary. And to basically, out of chaos, there will be peace. And there are people who believe that. And so this is why those of us at RBM, we continue to say that electoral politics cannot be your only tool here. It can't be the only tool in your toolbox. We really do have to have a massive movement. We really do need to organize more, whether it's through mutual aid, which we do over at RBN, because I'm here to warn people, there is going to come a time when I would say the vast majority of us that are part of the 99%, depending on whatever happens, we may have to only rely on mutual aid, to help each other. So I think that that's a big part of it. Like, they don't really need us, Kyle. Like, look at what's happening with technology. Look at what AI is doing. Look at what an AI can be used for, good or bad, by the way. But look at all the things they're creating. And it's just, how long is it before they don't need workers? You know what I read the other day? Did you know a computer science degree is becoming worthless now? They're saying right now, this is the number one degree that people are graduating with that they can't find jobs.
Wow. Yeah. You said it was conspiratorial, but I don't think it's conspiratorial at all. People like us, community is very, very important. And this is something that I see an increasingly popular sentiment amongst online communities, where people, the joke is always touch grass, right? But I really do think that's important. And, I realized this in my personal life back in 2020 when I got laid off, and I'm a mechanic. Cars are always going to be broken. So why would I ever get laid off? I did though, and I realized that I had access to a group of people that would basically make sure I was able to keep the roof over my head. My bass player said, "Hey man, if you need a job, I'm right here." My neighbor, a couple houses down, same deal. He's like, "Hey man, when you got laid off, you should just let me know. I would have got you a job." And thank God my dad is a business owner as well. He was able to kind of let me go work for him. But like, if you don't have that in your personal life, that's something that you should really try to get on the ball with, because when shit hits the fan, and you never know when it can and when it probably will, to have people that are going to have your back no matter what. I mean, that just goes way, 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 way beyond, casting a ballot for your, lesser evil candidate every few years.
That's right, 100%. And listen, there were a number of people that lost their jobs like during the pandemic, right? And there were a number of people that died during the pandemic. What was that all about? I mean, it just, and I don't want to get too deep into this because I know we're, on YouTube, but it's just, I just put these things together, and I'm just like, you mean to tell me that this just comes out of a vacuum, nowhere, like out of nowhere? And, all these people die and people lose their jobs. And I feel like that's something that's planned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that I've pondered quite a bit, and we kind of have to keep it YouTube friendly, but Trump launched a CIA campaign, a CIA propaganda campaign against China in 2019, in late 2019, if I remember correctly. And then all of a sudden COVID happens. And I'm not saying these two things are like inextricably linked and like this is exactly what happened, but then, this came from China, and like all this bad stuff comes from China. But who has the US really been gunning after for the last 10 years since Obama's pivot to Asia? It's China. China is the greatest threat. We hear that from every single administration, including the Biden administration, where, there were arms guarantees with the Philippines. We just found out now, like a week or two ago, that there were some hearings, and apparently there were like multiple troop platoons deployed to Taiwan, and this is all in the name of taking down China. And you mentioned people's living standards being better in other countries. Well, whose living standards got a lot better over the last 20 years? People who live in China. And I think the US kind of looks at that and says, that was us 100 years ago, even 50 years ago. We're not there anymore. But like, China has 1 billion people, and obviously not everything's perfect there, but like, I've had Jason Smith on the show multiple times, and we talked about this a little bit, where he's like, yeah, I had to get like back surgery or something like that. He was like, it was like $50. I stayed in the hospital overnight, and I walked out, paid $50 cash. Here, we would be broke. My wife and I make, like I said, decent enough money that we live good enough. We could do what we want. That would probably damn near bankrupt us. Most people I know, that would bankrupt them. In China, hey man, whatever. If you want to get a new car, a BYD EV, that's like nothing. Here, I work for General Motors, brand new EV Cadillac. You're looking more than my house.
Yeah, it's China doesn't have the poverty rates that we have either. I was just watching Danny Haifong was just recently in China, and I was watching some of his videos of his time there. And again, it's, if you look at like the infrastructure, you look at their public transportation, like, why do we not have a high speed rail in the United States in 2025? Like it's really like insane when you think about it, right? And I understand that China is older, but still, like, why do we not have these things, right? Why didn't we invest in our infrastructure? There's a report called the American Society of Civil Engineers, and they actually give a report card grade about American infrastructure. And it's very damning if you want to know how our infrastructure is actually doing. But they also give a list of solutions, like what we need to get to have a B plus or an A, et cetera. So there's a lot of things like we need improvement, for here in the United States, and no country is perfect. But I do feel like China took an approach that was going to benefit their people. Like they found a way to decrease the homelessness population. They found a way to really like tackle poverty, and they found a way to improve their infrastructure. And the push that I've been giving is that instead of us trying to fight with China, if anything, we should be trying to partner with them and work with them so that we can work together. Because here's the thing. The days of the United States being like this big global power and, we're the best and the biggest country, that's changing. And you can see it when you look at countries like China, or you look at countries like Russia, where the people there don't have to worry about having like GMOs in their food, like things like that. Like, we have RFK Jr. there that's trying to get some of these dyes like out of the food sources that we have. And meanwhile, like, you can go to a country like Russia and they don't even have these harmful chemicals in their food. Like, they found ways to take care of their people because they decided to prioritize taking care of the people. The problem with the United States is that we don't prioritize taking care of Americans here. We prioritize, and by we, I mean our government, they prioritize taking care of Wall Street and the military industrial complex. And that's why, like, the homelessness rate continues to increase. At one point, California was the state that you would point to and say they have the tent communities. Tent communities are everywhere now.
Yeah, it's very, very sad. My wife and I went to New York City, as we were talking a little bit before the show, and that was the first time in my entire life, because I live a little bit outside of Pittsburgh, and like Pittsburgh's actually still a pretty nice city, but that was the first time that I ever saw like homeless people on like a scale that I was like, wow, like you walk out of a hotel and on every block there's a homeless person. It smells awful because of, the human suffering, to put it kindly, all over the streets. And it's like, this is just awful. How can we have a country that's supposed to be like the number one superpower in the entire world, and most average people would be like, I don't want to go to your major cities because they're absolutely littered with homeless people all over the place. Like, it's insane to me.
Yeah, it's definitely increased too. People are moving out of the cities too. Same here in Massachusetts. More people are leaving Boston and they're moving to like the greater Boston area. So they're moving to other towns that are nearby. It's just, I mean, I can tell you, when I came here in 2011, I didn't see many homeless people. Now that is very different. You can't go to one subway station and not see like homeless people like just spending the night in the subway station now. Like, it's definitely increased. Not to mention there are a number of homeless veterans, which oftentimes isn't talked about. You have all these homeless veterans that are sleeping on the street, don't have the resources that they need. The VA is a mess. I can tell you that from experience. And it's crazy. Like, this is what happened to the people who decided to fight for our country, and they come back and this is how they're treated. They're not given the help that they really need. There's a lot that goes into this, but people have been moving. And the other warning that I've given to people is that people are leaving those major cities and they're moving to places that are more affordable. And that will also cause the cost of living in those states to increase as well. Like, Michigan's a big popular location now. Like, people are moving to Michigan. I'm sounding the alarm about that one, right? Because it goes back to supply and demand. I remember when people were moving to Nashville, Tennessee. Nashville, Tennessee is now one of the most expensive cities in the East to live in. So all of these patterns of movement that are happening throughout the United States is basically just causing the cost of living to increase across the country. And that's because our government doesn't really want to fix that problem.
Yeah, well, one of the problems that they are seeking to fix, at least a problem, quote unquote, is now this Golden Dome, which just seems so ridiculous to me. We're we're between two countries that look at us as relative, friends, if you will. Now, granted, obviously there's issues with the Mexican cartels, and then obviously drugs getting through the Canadian border, but like, they're not going to fight a war with us anytime soon, right? And then we're surrounded by two oceans. Now, Trump campaigned on this, and now this big, beautiful bill allegedly is going to fund the creation of a golden dome over America, which is supposed to be, my understanding, is something similar to what Israel has of the Iron Dome, which is a missile defense system, which, to clue in people like us, it seems like just a giant boon for arms contractors and defense contractors. They're going to get to build a whole bunch of missile defense systems on the coast of, every single, state, and to defend us from what? China, who doesn't really care to send people over here, or Iran or Russia. Like, what is this about?
I think it's a waste of money, to be honest with you. It's absolutely ridiculous. Again, I agree with you. I think it's a win for weapon contractors. And I think that it really, it's done in such a way that for those who are not politically astute and those who are not maybe watching other forms of media like independent media, it instills fear in them that like we have to protect ourselves because China and Russia want to come after the United States. And like, and I hear it, sometimes mainly from a lot of older voters that like, oh no, China is going to come and attack us. And I'm like, really? Why? What?
Yeah.
They're not even. We talk more about them than they talk about us.
Mhm.
So it's just, to me, it's a waste of money, and it's, I feel like it's performative. Like, protect us from what? Is it because we have all these bases all over the world? Is it because like we're the ones, one of the major countries that continues to attack other countries and steal their resources because we participate in imperialism? I mean, it's just it's absolutely crazy. And I will say this: I lived in a country that had a wall.
Mm.
People still found a way to get over the wall.
Mm.
And if people want to find a way to get to us, they will find a way to get to us.
Mm. Yeah, I really don't think, and I'm guessing you would probably agree with this, that like China, Russia, Iran, I don't think they have an interest in coming over here because they probably look at what we did to all of these countries that we've attacked over the last 20, 30 years and think like, nah, we don't want that. We don't want occupation. We don't want bombs dropped on our civilians. It just doesn't make sense. And to the point about China as well, it's like I think they look at our country and see what we did and think, yeah, we're just not going to do that. Like they'll go do diplomacy by other means, but like, what the US has done to its credibility and its population and other countries around the world, why would any other country want to step up and take that same role? Why wouldn't they want to be like, hey, we're going to be a little bit more diplomatic? Yeah, and yeah, to the point of a wall as well. The wall's great and all, but if you want to get people to stop coming to your country, then you eliminate the incentives, and no one ever seems to talk about that.
Right. And it's also, I've had international students that were from different countries, and I've had students that were from China and students that were from Russia. And most of them didn't want to stay here in the US after graduation. Like most of them wanted to go back home. The students from China made it very clear to me. They said, yeah, I can try for the visa process here, but back home in China, I'm pretty much guaranteed a job because I have a degree from an American university and I'm guaranteed housing. So
Mhm.
that's another thing, right? The students that I had that were from Russia also, like, they didn't want to stay here. They wanted to go back to Moscow. So I mean, it's I don't know. I think it says something. I'm also noticing. I don't know if you ever watch these videos, but there's a number of videos that are increasing on YouTube of Americans moving to other countries. This has been an increase in that as well. Like there's all these videos of Americans that move to places like Singapore or China, et cetera. And they're just basically like documenting their experience living in those other countries. And these people seem very happy. Now, the one thing I will say is they probably do miss like their family. I think that's
Yeah.
always, an issue. But I think if you move to a place like Singapore or something like that, like it's pretty westernized, right? Like
Yeah.
they have like so I think it depends like where you move to. Nico, for example, moved to Brazil,
Yeah.
and he seems to be enjoying his time there. He said the cost of living is so much cheaper. Same with like Glenn Greenwald. So I think you're going to see more of that, more Americans, especially those that I think retire and are living on a fixed income, moving to places like Mexico, for example. There's a whole, I don't know if everyone knows, but there's a whole American community that lives in Mexico City or right outside of
Mm.
Mexico City. Like they have their own, community where like
Mhm.
they moved there and they said, this is where we just want to retire because everything is just, it's so much cheaper.
Mm. Yeah, speaking of Nico, I'm a little jealous because I remember him saying he was thinking about getting a BYD, and they're like super affordable. He said he drives a Chevy Equinox now, and like those are pretty nice. But I gotta imagine a BYD after all the videos I've seen of them. I'm like, I'd go with the BYD. I'm a GM guy through and through, but I'd get the BYD. But yeah, kind of to the point of the show, I entitled it "Distractions, Deception, and Dissidents." I was thinking about all these Doge cuts, and I feel like a lot of Trump voters, kind of like we talked about a little bit earlier, I think a lot of them got fooled because, initially it was, oh, this is great. We're going to cut all this waste, fraud, and abuse. And I mean, I was all for it. I was almost to the point where I'm like, you know what? I almost regret not voting for Trump. But then it was like pretty much after day 30, I'm like, okay, they're not serious about signing all these cuts into law. They're not serious about getting rid of all these wasteful programs. They're not serious about making America great again. And now we see, the big, beautiful bill, like we've been covering, we're going to fund this giant golden dome. And then also the same, when it comes to Ukraine, I'll have this ended as president elect. Okay. Well, it's, like day 152 or whatever. And we're more engaged in Ukraine, and we're going to have more sanctions on Russia than even Joe Biden did. So, like, what are we doing? I don't know how people could look at what Trump's doing right now and be like, yeah, he's doing a bang up job.
It's somewhat similar to what happened in 2016, where he said he was going to, dismantle the swamp, fight against the deep state. But once he was in, it was a different story. No, he's going to do what benefits his billionaire buddies, right? He's going to back his class. He's going to back like the donor class, the people who donated to him. And people say whatever they want when they're running because they're trying to get elected. Right. So you had like this segment of working class Americans that voted for Donald Trump because they believed that he was going to fight for the little guy, even though he ran that same script for 2016, but believed that this was going to happen. And what you see is that he's implementing policies that benefit the wealthy people. It's funny because Elon was just interviewed and he's now basically saying that like all the Doge cuts that he did, like it was just a waste of time because of that bill. That just came out. And then you look at the people that lost their jobs. And I was like, what are these cuts here? You guys are cutting federal employee jobs. So people are losing their jobs. I mean, and it's very easy. Like they were talking about cutting the defense budget, which I agreed with. At one point, does, yeah. They were like 50%. We can cut it by 50%. Oh, we're going to cut it by 15%. Da da da. And again, this is all a gimmick, like to get votes. And they're not cutting the defense budget, right? Like if anything, they're enriching it. They're giving more money like to the Pentagon and the military industrial complex. And so I think what I'm starting to notice is that more people are willing to say now that, hey, he's selling out to the donor class just like Biden did. And I'm glad people are saying that because once they get on that train, then I think it would be more easier to convince people this is why we got to break the two-party system. And that's my goal. And we'll see, what happens come 2028. But I really do feel like 2028 would really be the time for a third party or independent candidate with name recognition. They would need to have that. Really just try to like dismantle the two-party system because the Democrats aren't doing well either, even though they're not in office, because the polls show that the majority of Americans are still unhappy with the Democratic Party. They feel like they're not fighting back against Trump enough. I've heard this from people also in person that they're upset with them. So people are angered. There's anger on both sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and to the point about the Democrats, it's like, who do they have at this point? Like, you ran Kamala Harris, who was just transparently the most awful candidate they could have possibly ran. I honestly thought they were going to try to drag Biden across the finish line, but obviously they couldn't do that due to his health. But like, who's on the bench? Are you going to try and run Gavin Newsom, who just had California completely burned down? Allegedly, she was too anti-Semitic, so we couldn't run Josh Shapiro, even though her husband's Jewish, which is just like the most hilarious thing ever. But you're going to run Josh Shapiro, the guy who was signing bombs to be sent over to Ukraine. Like, who's on the Democrats' bench? They got nothing. But I mean, they could always pull like, somebody out of the hat that just nobody's heard of and will be magically popular, but I don't really see that happening either.
It's wild. They're mentioning names like Rahm Emanuel, who closed like over 40 schools in Chicago. He's also like very pro-war. He supported the Iraq War. They're mentioning people like J.D. Pritzker, who's also a billionaire. Like the party, I think the Democratic Party is dead because, and I'll say why, right? Kamala Harris was the vice president. And there's all these books that are being published right now about like Biden did this behind the scenes and oh my God, he wasn't well for quite some time. As if those of us who have been watching TV didn't know what we were seeing on the screen. As if we didn't know that Joe Biden was having obviously cognitive difficulties, right? But even with that, the problem that the Democratic Party has is that they basically told Joe Biden, and by they, I mean Democrat leadership, to pick Kamala Harris as the VP when that wasn't even the person that he wanted. So this is another thing, right? Originally, he wanted Amy Klobuchar. Now, she's kind of cuckoo as well, but he didn't want Kamala Harris. He did so because Dem leadership told him to pick her to help him get Black voters. So she was never first. And then you go into this situation where Biden decides, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and drop out of the race and nominate Kamala. She skips a primary process and just is automatically the nominee. Again, she wasn't first. She basically just skipped all these hurdles that other people, really had to go through. She wasn't really vetted. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's almost as if they were just trying to give it to her because they feel like they owed it to her. It's a weird feeling. And then she ran in 2020. She couldn't get a delegate in her own state in California. She had to drop out after Tulsi Gabbard basically ended her presidential run there by telling the truth about her record in California. And it's just, Barack Obama was very much involved in this. Mm-hmm. And what that shows you is that Bill and Hillary Clinton, Obama-esque era of the Democratic Party is dead. Mm-hmm. Now, they're not going to try to move towards like progressive policies or anything like that either because their donors won't let them. So they're in a difficult place because they abandoned the working class and embraced donors instead. And now it's like they lost a segment of the working class, but they can't get them back unless they abandon the donor class. But then the donors don't want anything to do with them.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I share that sentiment, but I my opinion on this is always like, never underestimate Trump and the Republicans' abilities to fuck everything up because let's face it, they probably will. But also, Democrats are a machine. I had Melissa Whitty on, and we talked about like campaign financing, and she really broke down very, very well about how like campaign financing works and how the Democrats are a lot more like shut up and get in line in this respect, where like, obviously the Republicans have a certain machine to them as well. They're a little bit better with like the alternative media. It's like the Democrats are a lot more lockstep. And to the whole point of Kamala Harris, it's so funny because like the Democrats have blatantly rigged every single presidential primary for like in everybody's recent memory. Bernie Sanders, twice now, Joe Biden in 2020. And then, they throw Kamala Harris in there and people were like surprised. I'm like, this is the Democrats we're talking about. Are you really surprised that like they did what they've done for every single election in recent memory? Yeah, of course they're going to run Kamala without, having any kind of serious primary campaign because that's just what the donors wanted. And clearly it didn't work out in their favor. And, when Trump won, I said, make sure everybody takes this, good opportunity to really kick the Democrats when they're down because they honestly deserve it.
And have you noticed that the fight back attitude has started to die down? Like, for example, there was a lot of discussion about the Bernie and AOC oligarchy tour. Notice you don't hear much about it anymore. Yeah. It's a time and a moment, a time and a moment, right? So they're not talking much about that anymore. And then this whole idea that you're supposed to fight back against the elites and the oligarchy, but not the ones in the Democratic Party.
Right. Yeah, it's always just we don't like those billionaires. We don't like the Elon Musks, the Sachs, and all them. But like the Democrats that are donating to all the to all the Democratic billionaires, like, oh no, they're fine. Don't talk about them. You mentioned breaking the duopoly earlier, and I know the last time you were on, we talked a little bit about kind of like the Libertarian Party working with the Trump administration. Now that that's kind of all been settled, and it largely looks like libertarians got rug pulled. Essentially, we were promised, position in the cabinet, and that, oh, we were going to get all these concessions from the Trump administration. I love Angela. I consider her a friend, but kind of seems like, once again, she got rug pulled, whether knowingly or not. Don't know. Can't. That's speculation. What would you kind of say, and what's your perspective on how that all kind of went down? Where basically, for lack of a better word, it seems like Angela kind of threw the Libertarian Party to the wolves to basically get Trump, or to help Trump. What's your kind of opinion on that?
Yeah, this is something I struggle with third parties. I think at the end of the day, you have to remain separate from the duopoly, because the duopoly will screw you in the end, right? So if it had been that Jill Stein would have said, okay, Kamala, I'm going to work with you or whatever, Kamala Harris, if she would have won, wouldn't have fulfilled any of those promises that she would have made to the Green Party, right? So this is just a way to get the voters that are more willing to vote third party to come over to the other side. I think that third parties really have to ask a question, right? And this is why I don't belong to a party, right? So I'm a registered independent. I think that they have to ask, like, do we really want to be a third party as an opposition to the duopoly, or do we want to be a social club that has these principled positions, but at the end of the day, when our person, doesn't get as far, we're going to support one of the two parties. And I say that because I don't think Chase Oliver was necessarily the best candidate, like, to be honest with you. Just being honest. But I can talk about it from the left. It was really interesting to me, people who were Green Party members that were trying to make the case for Kamala instead of trying to make the case for Jill Stein. That was very weird to me. And I'm not a member of the Green Party. And even I saw this and I'm like, why are you a member of the Green Party if you're advocating for the Democratic Party? You should just be a Democrat. It was really weird to me. So I feel like there's been some infiltration there, like with the Howie Hawkins, wing of the Democratic Party, because Howie Hawkins said this also on RBN. He said that, well, at the end of the day, you just got to go ahead and vote for Joe Biden. I'm like, what are you? And what are you doing? Right. So I think that's a question that they really need to ask. And I think that, like, someone like Jill, for example, definitely anti-duopoly, like, stood firm on that, was not willing to, give support to Kamala, just like she wasn't willing to give support to Hillary Clinton. But I think that when you have members that are part of the party that are going to vote for one side of the duopoly regardless, then it kind of becomes like, is this really an alternative to the two-party system? And are we going with the lesser of two evils, or what we feel is going to be the lesser of two evils? And that worries me, because then I feel like, how are we going to ever break the duopoly if that's happening, right? And I believe that if you have a candidate that has large name recognition and they are able to raise a lot of money, I think it could happen. I brought this up on my show the other day. These guys would not be my choices. But I saw Stephen A. Smith ask Jon Stewart, and he said, hey, you and me, 2028. Now, not my candidates, but Jon Stewart has a big name, and he has been known to get legislation passed, which is crazy considering he's not a politician. He's been able to get legislation passed in Congress. Stephen A. Smith has a big name, at least in the sports world. He has been coming around to the political world more now. But the reason why I wonder about those two is because not just the name recognition, and yes, they have the money. They have the money to be able to get the message out there, et cetera. But they can pull in different people. Stephen A. Smith is, an independent. He said he's conservative on some issues, but he said that he's, a liberal on, like, I guess, like the social issues. Jon Stewart is more to the left of Stephen A. Smith. Even some of the progressives like Jon Stewart. Now, I think when it comes to foreign policy, I don't know. Like Stephen A. Smith is not well versed in that. Jon Stewart gave a medal to a Nazi who I don't realize if he knew that at that time, but I don't know if he apologized for that. So I think in foreign policy, they definitely would need to educate themselves about that. But I think if it's someone that's a big name, I think they can really do it. This is why some of us were really excited when Cornel West like announced that he was going to run with the Green Party, and then that whole story, like going from different parties here or whatever, like that kind of stuff, and that didn't become as big as it could have come, right? But I just it has to be someone that is very well known. And if Bernie Sanders and AOC had put AOC to the side for a second, in 2016, when the Democratic Party decided to cheat Bernie Sanders in the primary and give those states that he won to Hillary Clinton, if Bernie Sanders would have started a third party at that point in time, which he was asked to do so by Jesse Ventura and also by Chris Hedges and Shama Sawant, we wouldn't be having this conversation today.
Right. Yeah. I agree with pretty much everything you said. I understand people's angle on supporting Trump or even supporting Kamala. I don't agree, but I understand. And especially like libertarians' plea for Trump. But much to your point about Kamala, I think it would have been the same either way. Like the Greens had broached Kamala and said, hey, we'll compromise on this. We'll pull out of the race to endorse you if you get this concession. There's 0% chance that she was going to follow through on that. I guess to vindicate the pro-Trump libertarians, they did get Russ Ulbricht free. Now, some people may argue that, hey, Thomas Massey got that promise without the Libertarian Party. I've heard other people argue that, like, oh, RFK was trying to get the Libertarian Party and he was part of this whole deal. I really think that RFK didn't really give a shit about the Libertarian Party. He just wanted access or, ballot access. And when he found out that he couldn't get that, then that was when he was like, all right, I'll just throw my weight behind whoever will have me. Because I'm sure you remember, he said, if Kamala will have me, I'll go with Kamala. If Trump will have me, I'll go with Trump. He's an opportunist. He really wasn't about anything other than, his bottom line, which eventually he did get to see it. And, I think he raised some good conversations, but much to your point, I just think that like, hey, if we want to help out Trump, just go be a Republican. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And I'm sympathetic to that angle, but don't pretend like, I think it's kind of disrespectful to say like, we're going to raise all this money and do all this work for this third party, but then we're just going to throw it towards one of the main parties. Because I think most people go to a third party because they're disillusioned with the two main parties.
That's right. And I'm trying to remember, gentleman's name ran Libertarian in 2016. I think was the most Gary Johnson. I think he was the most successful Libertarian presidential candidate.
Yes.
Yeah. So he did something there. I mean, it's, yeah, I just think that especially if it's someone that has a big name, we all know ballot access is going to be a big issue. But I noticed something different this past presidential election, which I really did appreciate. And that was those third party debates. I really appreciated Thomas Massey, and I forget the name of the organization that put that all together. But I appreciated them having the third party debates, which we should just have anyway. Like,
right.
Yeah,
Connor, let's get a second party going. The Ron Paul saying goes, people keep saying vote for Republicans or Democrats, but he says he just wants a second party, because I mean, it's true. It's laughable to me that people thought that Kamala Harris would have been better on Israel or Gaza when she had pretty much stated right from the outset that like, there's going to be no difference between me and Joe Biden. And same deal even with like South America, just the same deal. There would have been, the same old policies, because it would have been the same Democratic elite running Kamala Harris. It wouldn't have been Kamala Harris pulling the strings. You could maybe argue that Trump has a little bit more autonomy, but I mean, he's still beholden to Miriam Adelson, the PayPal mafia, and he still has a large, constituency of neoconservatives that are backing him as well. So,
And it would have been, and I just want to give everybody the heads up, like if Nikki Haley would have become that nominee, which was really weird that Democrats were kind of pulling for her. This is going to show you it's like one corporate party. We would be having the same, like Nikki Haley she's a warmonger. Yeah. Like she's a wacko, so the war situation would also be, in fact, I really do believe if Nikki Haley would have won, I think she would be advocating for us to go to war with Iran.
Yes, undoubtedly. Well, I know you're on a little bit of a time crunch. Let me read these 2 super chats real quick, and then I'll let you do plugs, and obviously closing comments. The VA goes out of the way to not help you at all. I tried getting counseling, and I was assigned a 26-year-old who didn't know anything, shaking my damn head. What a shame.
Yeah.
I've been saying for years, Dems and reps are controlled opposition to each other, answering to their donor corporate overlords. Yeah. I mean, what else is there to say? So Sabrina, I know you had a documentary, if I remember correctly, when I tried to originally book you, because you said you weren't available till after Memorial Day weekend, which obviously we're there now. So closing thoughts, anything you want to tell the people about, the floor is all yours.
Yeah, I'm very lucky that I have an editor who reached out to me when I announced that I was working on a documentary, and we actually just met a couple hours ago. So we're going through the editing process, which will take quite a bit, but it's coming around really good. It's a documentary about displacement and gentrification in Boston, and how Boston has changed over the years, and all these, $1 million projects that are being built in the city. And in order to, you need to know who was pushed out so that those projects can be built, right? So this is a problem that's happening in major cities across the United States, but the gentrification in Boston is crazy rampant, and all the politicians and big money are in on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, wow. Yeah, that's not something I've heard much about, but I've heard you talk about it. You had 2 individuals on your show. I think it was last night, and I remember them talking about. I think they were talking about how how Atlanta used to be, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, it's happening all over. I mean, like, it's been happening here in Boston for quite some time, like years. It didn't just happen overnight, but it has been increasing. And my big concern is that these cities are they're just becoming a place for the rich. Like a lot of the people, if you know the history of Boston, Boston was basically, it was working class, families that were able to afford to live in the city and have just regular jobs. Like, they didn't have to have a professional job. They didn't have to have a college degree. And now it's gotten to the point where even the college degree and professional job, the salary may not be enough for you to even live in the city. It's insane. Like, how people have been pushed out, and they've let all these tech companies and startups come in. And at the result of working class people who grew up here, who had to move further away. This is also why, just a heads up, if you ever come to visit Boston, this is also why you don't hear the Boston accent as much. When you watch movies like The Town and The Departed, that's not Boston. That's what Boston used to be. So even if you go to like South Boston, which I lived in South Boston for a short time, you don't really hear that unless it's someone that owns like a business in Southie, and they grew up there, but they don't live there. Like, most of the people who are living there now, they call them yuppies, or the gentrifiers or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, that whole like character of the Boston neighborhoods, like, it's not like that anymore. So just keep that in mind when you watch movies like The Town and The Departed and stuff like that. Boston's not like that anymore.
Yeah, it's absolutely insane. And I consider myself more along the lines of an immigration restrictionist, but I think part of the beautiful thing of that kind of perspective is that, like, no, Poland should be Poland and Boston should be Boston. Pittsburgh, people joke about the Pittsburgh accent. I have it when I get a little tipsy, but like, we say things like yins and whoosher and just all these different words that are specific to Pittsburgh. But, it's a shame to see people basically forced out of their homes because they can't afford to live there anymore. Pittsburgh's a blue collar city, but like, I couldn't afford to live down in freaking Pittsburgh now. And it's about an hour away from me. So like, yeah, everyone's moving to the suburbs. But, once again, part of the beautiful thing about some of these areas is that, like, there's unique things, there's unique people about all these individual areas. So to see people kind of just removed from there because, let's say BlackRock or whatever company is buying property and then billionaires are moving in, it's tragic. It's very tragic.
And one of the things that I really appreciated when I moved to Boston was just the architecture. The way that the older houses, like the cobblestone streets, the way the houses they're uniquely different. The triple deckers that you'll see like in Dorchester and throughout the city and things like that. the brownstones in Back Bay. Like there's a uniqueness to that. And when you put I don't know, a large luxury condo
Yeah.
building that's like a box next to something like that, it looks out of place and it feels out of place. And you have to ask yourself, like, what's really happening here?
Mhm. Yeah, it's kind of like the meme of where you look around and all the McDonald's when we were kids looked cool and colorful, and now they're all like soulless and dark buildings. I mean, it's kind of cheesy, but it definitely is a sign of the times, and it's like I said, it's tragic because some of the beauty in a lot of this stuff is just like the natural architecture, just how these places were developed by our ancestors or people hundreds of years ago.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. So hopefully, we're aiming for the end of June. I'm being adventurous with that date, but that's the goal right now, and we'll see in like how it goes. But we're just going through the editing process now.
Cool. All right. Well, Sabby, go ahead, plug everything you want to plug other than that, and we'll close her out there.
Yeah, so you guys can catch me on my channel on YouTube. It's called Sabby Sabs, or you can catch me on Revolutionary Blackout Network with Nick and JB and Rome.
Awesome. Well, everyone, make sure you go check that out. I really enjoy their streams. It's always a lot of fun. And until next time, everybody, thank you so much and take care.